Hello, everyone. Welcome, of course, to the Rollers Guild. We are still on a brief hiatus from our campaign, the Gilded City, but we thought we'd come to you with something a little different, something kind of fun. So Matt and I are going to sit down and do a tier list video of all of the classes in Dungeons and Dragons, 5th edition. So as you can see here, we have, of course, the 13 classes. We are going to do all the PHB classes first, then we will do Artificer last because it was added later. But if you like this video, give us a like, leave us a comment. Let us know why our tier ranking is objectively wrong.
Please roast me. We got opinions.
Yeah, we have opinions. I'm sure you all have opinions too. As said, obviously, these are, of course, opinions. So please do keep that in mind. And I will also say right out the gate, if you love a particular class and we rank it poorly, I'm sorry. It's just not our cups of tea.
Tell us why we're wrong.
Tell us what you love about that class and convince us why Ranger should be S tier.
Oh my gosh. Coming out swinging.
That's
another thing. Like every single, because of the nature of this game, right? Dungeons and Dragons is creative. It is this sandbox with like loose guidelines. Every single one of these classes can be S tier.
Yeah,
you can build with the backgrounds, with which race or world you brew with the DM. Every single one of these can be this god tier incredible experience.
Yes.
That does everything super well.
Yes.
But I think
that's not what we're here to rank.
Yeah.
We're
looking at it more like as looking at the class without the rest of the party, without multi-classing, what's written in the classes, and can they do Dungeons and Dragons well?
Yes.
How well do they do it?
Yes. So this is that's sort of where we're going with this tier list. I know I know the whole tier list craze is maybe like 2 years old at this point, but I love me a good tier list to this day. I cannot tell you how many tier list videos I watch and enjoy. So hopefully you all enjoy this as well. And like we said, let us know why we're wrong down in the comments. But
incredible. Ben, where are we starting?
We're going to go and get started right here with the Barbarian. So Barbarian, before I put him in there. What are we feeling and why are we feeling it for Barbarian? What are we?
So in general, when you said, hey, let's do a tier list, I started brainstorming a couple things. And in general, I think in looking at these different rankings, right? S is the best, A, B, C, D, and so on.
Yeah.
There's kind of this, what do we have written here? Best in almost all areas. Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it as kind of like an S tier can do it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's not just
S tier is
what their class
is an incredibly well-rounded character that can do basically anything.
Could potentially single-handedly be their own party.
Right.
So then going down after that, it's like the best of what it does as a class. And then maybe it's decent at what it does. It's balanced. Maybe it's a jack of all trades, master of none type thing. It's good at, but it's well balanced and it works.
Yeah.
And then after that's like this, what do we have? Poor in some areas. Yeah, could use some like improvement.
Yeah.
And then I think D is going to be garbage. Absolute garbage.
Basically what D is. So with that in mind, Barbarian, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you I'm leaning B for Barbarian.
Really?
So I Barbarians are I don't know. I could be convinced to go A for Barbarian, but there's no reality where I put Barbarian as S. And
Agreed.
I think for me, just personally, what I like in a D&D character when I get to play them, which is rarely, or when I get to just make them in my free time, which is much more often. I have probably way too many characters on my D&D Beyond account. But Barbarian is just it doesn't have it feels like there's not enough options with Barbarian, right? When you're a Barbarian, you do one thing, you do that thing well, but you do one thing, which is you rage and then you hit stuff. And some of the Barbarian subclasses add a little bit more nuance to that, but Barbarian, I think overall is mostly pretty
It's a one-trick pony.
It's a one-trick pony. It's pretty bland. And I think Barbarian can take a hit better than almost any class in the game.
Sure.
But when it comes to dealing weapon damage, I think it's outclassed by other classes, which we'll talk about later. But so I think that's why I'm leaning B. But if you feel differently, please feel free to try to convince me.
I don't completely disagree. So the Barbarian, I would put it at an A.
Okay.
At an A tier. Because I think when I'm looking at a class, there's kind of that idea of can it do a lot of things? Mm-hmm. Is it really good at its thing? Can it do nothing? And so like magic, there are subclasses with barbarians that can cast some spells, but its main feature, the rage, means you cannot concentrate or cast new spells, right? So magic's out the window. There's healing. There's no built as basic barbarian. There's no healing. Then there's what I like to think of as the kerthwack factor. Doing damage and taking damage.
They can kerthwack real good.
They're incredible.
Yeah.
They're at the top, rivaling some of these other classes, right? And then there's this idea of like infiltration or being like the face of the party, right? Of mastering social situations or getting into places you're not supposed to be. And they don't really thrive typically in that area either.
That being said, I will throw out there that because a lot of barbarians are going to be not wearing armor, they do tend to have pretty decent dexterity.
Good stealth and probably pretty intimidating. Yeah. So it's possible.
So it is possible. I will say, sorry to interrupt you, but one point of detraction that I would also say for Barbarian on my end is trying to balance the stats of Barbarian is difficult because Barbarian is a 3-stat class, really, right? Because all your rage stuff is strength based, so you want strength. Then you want high constitution because that's your whole role in the party is to take hits. But then because most of the time barbarians aren't going to be wearing armor, or if they are, it's light or medium armor because they cannot wear heavy armor and rage. They want at least a decent dexterity, so that's 3 stats you got to have high up. And so it's no wonder so many barbarians have low mental stats because players are trying to make sure that they have their good scores in all the physical stats. So I think for me, that's another reason why I don't like Barbarian as much is because you're trying to focus on so many stats all at once. Most classes are 2 stats, right? There's 2 stats that they're worried about. But Barbarian, you got to, and sometimes you have a subclass that introduces a 3rd important stat for that subclass, but the base class is usually 2 stats that are important. Sure. So you can if I were to play, I don't know, a fighter, I feel like an intelligent fighter is a lot easier to balance stat wise than an intelligent barbarian. Unfortunately, as much as mess with. As much as I'd love to break stereotype and build a barbarian with a high int score, it's really hard to on a mechanical level justify that with balancing your stat distribution. Anyway, continue with what you were saying with Barbarian.
Yeah, and then there's kind of this fifth outlier of how I think of things. It's kind of like, are they a support class? Right? And as we kind of encounter them, maybe we can talk about being a support class, because that one's really hard, I think, to talk about without context of the greater party.
Sure.
But like Barbarian doesn't do that. So really going down this line, I've only got the one of the things that it's like really good at. And it does that, I think, super well. So I did put it at A, but going by the great in many areas versus in what it's designed to do.
So I mean, because here's the thing, right? A is listed as, I did not make this tier list. I found this on Tier Maker. So with that being said, there is sort of a weird discrepancy between great in many areas and decent in most areas. Like, that's not the same. I feel like we can be a little lenient in terms of like how we interpret that.
Okay, can we think of it as can do it all, best of what it does, balanced?
Yeah.
Could use some improvements and garbage.
I'm gonna change the text. There we go. Okay.
Nice.
Best
at what it. Oof. You're right. Later on classes in dealing and taking damage.
But you have kind of convinced me that barbarians are extremely good at what they are good at.
Yeah.
I'm convinced. I will agree with you, and we can put him in A.
Welcome to the A tier.
Welcome to the A tier. Barbarian. Next up, we have Bard. I feel like you and I both have the same ranking for Bard, but go ahead and tell me which one of these letters Bard goes in.
Maybe. I don't know. I am going to put the Bard at A. I'm going to have it join the Barbarian.
Okay. A. Interesting. I personally lean S for Bard. Now
I can see that.
But I can see why it would be an A instead of an S. But Bard's just good.
Yeah.
Bard's just good.
It's great.
It
is my favorite.
You talk more in depth about it since I went first with Barbarian.
The Bard, there's a reason I'm playing it in our campaign. The Bard is my favorite class. That being said, and it's at level 2, you get Jack of all trades. That is the idea of the Bard, is you can fill any role. You can do it all. But are you the best at everything? I think it leans into the Jack of all trades, master of none idea. You do get some expertise, but so looking at like magic in general, right? It's not only do they have magic, like the Barbarian, just disqualified in anything magical whatsoever.
Right.
But what does the spell list look like? And I think how often do you have access to those spells, right? So if you only have a couple spell slots, you're not going to be the strongest magic class as we're looking at them and comparing them all. If you're some friends like the Warlock, you really don't have a lot, but we can talk more about them later. The Bard has almost no offensive magics to them. Now, manipulation to help them be the absolute best face and a very good infiltrator. They're fighting the rogue for who's the absolute best, right? They can heal. They've got the healing down. They've got enough spell slots that they can use that healing and not waste things. But that inspiration of being the support class, right? That I was mentioning before, I think they are the ultimate support class that can't do it on their own.
Okay.
And because they can't quite do it on their own, I couldn't put them in an S tier.
All right.
right? They have to, they're all about enhancing the abilities of someone else and what they do. No one can quite do it like them, but there are some that get close. They have the like last little bit is that Kerthwhack factor. They don't got it.
No, I mean there are subclasses that lean into that a little
the College
bit.
of Swords that you
College
can
of
take.
Swords and College of Valor.
College of Valor.
Yeah, which are both different flavors of the same basic idea, which is a bard.
And you can use
weapons.
your bread and butter, that bardic inspiration, to enhance those abilities, make yourself better, tougher at combat. But in looking at the idea of the bard in general, is that the best use of bardic inspiration?
Sure.
I'm gonna be mean and say no.
Sure. All right. You know what? We can go A for bard.
Do you just agree?
No, I mean everything you said is right. I mean I agree with all of that. I think the reason I would have leaned towards S tier is just because of how versatile bards are and how customizable bards are, with magical secrets, especially if you do lore bard, you get the extra magical secrets, obviously. You know, it's a very customizable class. It is one of my favorite classes in the game. Yeah.
Listen,
but,
keep talking. Tell me why my best friend should be S tier. Let's go.
But you make a lot of good points in that, like, yeah, but also it is it's never going to be as good at some things as other classes. And yeah, depending on what you go with for your magical secrets, you don't get that much like blasty spells. There's some on the bard list, but not that many.
You get high up there. You can pick some really devastating stuff. And I think in the last episode, like, he's got Dissonant Whispers.
Right.
And if you get a good, but there are spells out there. They have access to heat metal, can be a devastating one.
Yeah. So yeah, but no, I mean it is really, really good at it's one of the best support classes in the game, and it can be good at most other things, but I think you're right. It is that it probably does fall more into an A tier than an S tier. Cleric is next. Cleric for me, straight up S tier. I'm gonna be honest. Cleric is easily one of the best. It is easily one of the best classes in the whole game. Maybe the best class in the whole game.
I think it might be the best. I agree.
It's got heavy armor. It's got depending on the subclass, it's got heavy armor, but at base it at least has medium armor. So usually has a pretty good AC. Clerics get just an incredible spell list. The cleric spell list is so good. I know most people are like, oh, clerics, they're just healers. Yeah, of course they have like the best healing spell list in the game, but they also have a pretty like powerful like damaging spell list. Like there are some powerful, devastating spells on that cleric spell list. I mean, and then the clerics also have some extremely cool subclasses. You know, Tempest Domain is really good. Twilight Domain, that's a relatively new one.
Incredible.
Really, really good. The Grave Clerics are incredible. The ability to cancel an enemy's nat 20 is
ridiculous,
remarkable. I think Cleric is the best class in the game and is S tier. I
very much agree. Put him S tier. They actually can do it all. Yeah. Magic, as we said, everything. Buffs, banes, healing, big it's not fireball, but the iconic throw a fireball at them, right?
Yeah.
They can do all that.
Yeah.
They can be the front line. They can be the back support.
Yeah.
They can even get through some social situations being a devout
Yeah,
person.
I love the cleric. The cleric is a fantastic class, and absolutely deserves that S tier.
All right, that's
Druid.
That's our level of S tier.
Yeah, that is
that.
yeah. Well, nothing's beating cleric for me, but
Nothing,
it's gotta get pretty close to get into the S tier, I guess. Okay, Druid.
Ooh, the Druid. I have never played a Druid because I can't quite get myself behind yet. I haven't found the time, the character, the setting in the game to get myself behind the idea of I can't wear metal. I can't use metal. That like is like one sentence in the player's handbook.
Yeah.
And the first time I read it, I missed it. And then I went back and went, oh. However, I think the Druid is another S tier.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree that the Druid is an S tier.
Because, again, let's go down the list. Magic, huge list of versatile, different types of spells.
Yeah.
The Kurthwak factor, all I'm going to say is wild shape into any old thing and have it beat the crap out of your enemy.
Yeah. Wild
and then
shape,
you can still keep going.
Yeah, wild shape is such a powerful ability because especially if you do Moon Druid, which is of course the one that leans most heavily into wild shape, because like yeah, okay, sure, this challenge rating 2 brown bear is maybe not the most dangerous thing on the field, but guess what? Once you kill it, the Druid is back. Oh, and also that brown bear at higher levels can cast spells. It can cast the Druid spells.
And if they cast a spell, cast a spell, concentration, bonus action, wild shape. It is a bonus action, right?
Yeah, bonus
action, wild
shape. For Moon Druid it is, yeah.
For Moon Druid, okay. You can maintain concentration, so it...
Besides which, Druids, I mean, I don't see it get used that often, but a Druid could theoretically like wild shape into like a spider and use that for recon, like sneak into a place. Who's gonna look sideways at a spider crawling through a dungeon? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, Druids are just and some of the newer Druid subclasses too, they take the wild shape and they give you like new different options on what to do with it. Yeah. Like Circle of Stars Druid has some cool stuff they can do with their wild shape.
Maybe I should play a Druid next. Maybe I should finally do it.
On top of their incredible spell list.
So good.
Yeah, I agree. Druid is an S tier. I think Cleric is a little bit more powerful, but I think Druid is S tier as well.
And because it's going to become important for a later conversation, the Druids for storytelling purposes, their innate connection to some nature and or tracking skills, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be putting your abilities in wisdom for this. Let's look at this. Already we have 2 S tier wisdom based, for the most part, characters.
Yeah.
Or classes.
Yeah.
Based upon what background and other things you take and your ideas building a Druid, obviously it's, again, completely customizable, but going along your typical routes, maybe what's suggested in that initial build.
Yeah.
This is going to be a very good tracker, forager, communicating with nature. And I'll just leave us there.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Druids and clerics, they're both classes that like lean really heavily into one stat. And then, there's other stats that are important. Cleric, I'm thinking Constitution and Strength are also important. Druid, Con and Dex probably are of secondary importance. But there's one stat that's like super important for both of them. Versus against Barbarian, like I said, which there's like 3 like very important.
If you roll really well, you can play Barbarian.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Great. We're in agreement.
We're in agreement on Druid. That was an easy one. Yeah. Fighter then.
Oh my gosh, take it away. Where do you put the fighter?
So fighter is another one of those classes that's like super, super customizable depending on the subclass you go, right? Because you want a little bit of magic, Eldritch Knight. You wanna just be like really good at hitting things, champion. You want some cool like battle techniques, battle master. And that's just the player's handbook option.
That's just the initial starting point.
Then there's in Xanathar's there's Samurai, which is a very powerful subclass. I think Arcane Archer is pretty underwhelming, to be honest. I've played an Arcane Archer. Arcane Archer is a little underwhelming. I do think the Samurai or the Battle Master are probably the best archers in the game. I think depending on how you build them, one of them could be, either of those could be the best archer in the game. Rune Knight is just so fun to me. I love the idea of Rune Knight. I think that's Tasha's. I love the Rune Knight. So I'm saying all this positive stuff about the fighter because I think it's a really, really good class. It's not an S tier though. For me, I would put fighter probably an A. I think fighter has a better Kerthwhack factor than the Barbarian personally. Plus, fighters by the end can hit 4 times with 1 action. And then if they action surge, they can hit 8 times in 1 round of combat. I think fighters are very good. They also have self-healing, which is nice. Yeah, I like fighters a lot. I know a lot of people say that fighters are bland, but I don't think that's true. I think that if you think that fighters are bland, you've probably only ever played a champion fighter, and champion fighter's not bad. But the only thing it really gives you is like better criticals, which is great. But if you want more interesting options, there are more interesting options in the fighter class. So but that being said, it doesn't quite reach the levels of like Cleric or Druid in terms of just sheer amount of what it can do. It is not quite as potent as Cleric or Druid. So I would say for me, fighter is going to be an A.
Yeah. I'm also going to put fighter A. The idea that fighters can be a little dull, I would very much encourage anyone to take the Battle Master subclass because your battle maneuvers are replicating magic.
Yeah.
Right?
Basically.
It's giving you these abilities and you can think of it and get really creative with how you use those, and it's this whole other level of play, right? Not to mention the fighter is the class I think that gets the most ability score improvements.
Yeah.
Which you could take feats to customize even more so. So maybe the fighter takes a little forethought and planning to really get the flavor that you want out of it. But again, it's so entirely customizable, and customizable to the point that can anyone else rival it?
Right.
So can it get magic? No. Not initially, but there are enough subclasses and ways to explore. The Eldritch Knight, very good, but a limited spell list.
Yeah.
As I said, I kind of consider the battle maneuvers as its own school of magic in its own sense. And in that regard, it's so unique and interesting that I just go ahead and say, yeah, sure, there's enough ways to get access to magic.
Yeah.
Obviously,
and Rune
the
Knight
Kerthwhack
also
the Rune
is
Knight,
a great like magic based
coming out all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Class A act.
All right. Next up, we have the monk.
Do you want me to go first?
You can go ahead and go first.
I'm going to be really mean.
Okay. Sorry, Eva.
I will preface this with, I am ready to be proven wrong.
Okay.
I think the monk is a C tier. Here's why.
Yeah.
So in looking at all the different things, you have to ask, okay, what is the monk's bread and butter, right? It's those key points. It's things that are fueling these maneuvers. Help me out here. It's the what can you use key points for? Stunning strike, or not stunning strike.
I don't. There's it's
bonus
not,
action.
I don't know what the class of things you can do with it is, but there's flurry of blows, there's stunning strike.
Thank you.
Step of
Stunning
the
strike,
wind.
flurry of blows, step of the wind. Yes, that comes at the second level or whatever. That's its bread and butter. So the monk is advertised, I argue, in this paper, I shall argue, as a melee class, right? I think it's a little bit of false advertising. That needs improvement. Because when you stack the monk against the fighter, the barbarian, it can't compare. Yes, it can hit a lot of times, but until you get into higher level of play, you're not dealing that much damage. And you can blow through your key points dangerously quickly. Now, the thing that could change my mind entirely on the monk is kind of breaking our own rules, thinking of it in context with the rest of the party. Because stunning strike is the most broken mechanic maybe in the game. The ability to stun an opponent simply because you hit them and then they have to win the Constitution save.
Right.
That lasts until your next round, giving the entirety of your party an opportunity to roll with advantage on attack.
And you can stun them again.
Again on your next turn. It can be a combat ender.
Yeah.
Just crippling and stunning, the DM into just chewing on their hair, right?
Right.
Trying to figure out what on earth to do with this crazy monk. There are things the monk can do also that others can't. It's the slow fall. They basically don't take fall damage unless that's a big one.
Yeah.
Their speed is ridiculous, so they can get to anyone and attempt to stun them.
Yeah.
But if you look at just the monk alone, it can't do the job as well as others can. And the things that it's good at aren't necessarily tied to winning the game, if you will. Sure. And that's why I just constantly think it needs improvement.
Yeah, so I guess because I think there is this like idea of using monks as sort of a frontline fighter, but I think what monks excel at is battlefield control and positioning, right?
A support class.
Stunning strike, as we've both said, is an incredibly powerful ability. They have some of the best movement options in the game, both between just their fast movement speed, but also step of the wind, and some other features that monks get. The falling, the fact that they can run up vertical surfaces.
Oh my God, I forgot.
Yeah. Yeah. Monks are very cool, and have a lot of good ability. They're really good at what they're good at, right? But yeah, I mean, they tend at lower levels, especially monks, I think really tend to struggle. I don't think monks really come online until they get stunning strike, right?
Yeah, fifth level and above.
Fifth level, sixth level, somewhere in there is when monks start getting really, start showing these like big improvements, because also monks are another monks, you kind of want to balance your wisdom and dexterity, right?
And if you're going to be upfront, you want some constitution.
And if you're going to be upfront, you want some constitution. So they almost become a 3-stat class at a certain point. You can build a 2-stat monk, right? Just wisdom and dex. But I think it becomes difficult to it's difficult to take hits already as a monk. And so I don't know. I love the flavor of monks. I love the idea of monks, especially Way of the Kensei monk is probably my favorite monk. They're really, really cool. But I think you're right. I think they're a C overall. I really like monks, and I think monks are very fun to play. I've played as monks in like one shots and stuff before, and I think they're incredibly fun to play. But I do think there's just especially if you're not in a good party dynamic to really support it. I think monks are probably need some improvement as a class.
I think also something you said just reminded. I don't.
Sorry, Eva.
Monks,
we love Janara.
I really want to be.
I really want to be clear that I'm very much stressing how much I love monks, and it does. I am disappointed that I am putting them in C, but I can't justify putting them higher.
If one of these problems that we had with it was fixed, I think this would become an overpowered class.
Yeah.
There are so many little good things. Again, it kind of has jack of all trades syndrome in some respect. It's just so good at so much, but are those things important enough to justify it joining the cleric, joining the druid?
Yeah.
Or even being the best at its specific thing.
Right.
Now, someone could come at me and say, no, here's the way to do a monk, and I am all ears.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's also a bit of a learning curve to a monk that
monks
I'm going to continue to be unfair to the monk. I don't think I'm necessarily going to put this in regards to everyone else, but I think it really needs someone who understands the action economy of 5th edition.
Yeah, monks can be a little difficult to learn.
Yeah. And because it is a game and you want people to be able to play the game, especially first timer to enjoy it, the monk presents a roadblock.
Yeah. I'm really sad to put monks in C, but I think...
As I was thinking about this, I went, oh no, I don't like the monk as much as I thought it did.
But no, I agree. I think it is C. I again want to stress how I really like the monk. I just wish that it did a couple things a little better than it does. If it took hits better, even I'd be willing to put it in A. But
yeah, I think if one thing was fixed, it would jump above B.
Yeah,
you go to A.
Yeah. Okay. Well, next up is Paladin.
Safe.
So, jumping from a class that needs improvement to a class that I think is another one of my personal favorite classes. Paladin is so good. It is, for me, I don't know if it would be A+ or S-, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
I could put it in either one, either A or S. It definitely straddles that line for me, because paladins they can hit super hard. Divine Smite is, I said this in the discussion video that we did, but because of Divine Smite, paladins are one of the best damage dealers just in the game, period. But
Yep.
I think they are the best damage dealer between the levels of like 3 and 8. You know,
which is where most campaigns typically are going to fall, because not many people play up to 15 and beyond. So I haven't considered any 15 and above.
Sure. Yeah.
Skills.
yeah. So, I mean, paladins are I mean, they've got that heavy armor proficiency, so they typically have high AC. They typically have good charisma because they're charisma casters. So they can fill in as the face of the party. Their spell list is, it's mostly either support / healing or self or sort of like smite spells,
cranking it up. Yeah,
cranking up their damage. So their spell list is mostly support, but that's not a bad thing necessarily. I mean, but also like Druid and Cleric, they can change their spells on a long rest, which is also very nice because they can really like each day adjust their spell list to what is coming up, assuming they have enough foreknowledge of what's coming. I will say, one thing that can be difficult as the paladin is balancing your stat spread. I know because paladins don't lean as heavily into the casting, right? You're maybe not going to have charisma be your top priority, but you want to have an okay charisma. And then usually,
I think there are things that are fueled by your charisma.
Yeah. There's like auras, and there's some of your spells and stuff like that. I mean, there is stuff that your charisma contributes to. You are a charisma caster, still, but I think that you want a decent charisma, but most of your damage is coming from hitting things and pumping divine smites into them. And so you don't really need charisma for that. So strength is usually gonna be your main stat. There is theoretically you could build a dex paladin, but I think most people are gonna go strength paladin.
Sure.
So I think paladins. I mean, I think paladins are extremely good. I think the one place where paladins fall short is and this is like the only again there's the difficulty sometimes with like balancing those stats, because you probably want a good constitution as well, because you're going to be on the front lines, right? So good strength, good con, good charisma. That's 3 stats to balance, which can be a challenge, but I think it's a little bit alleviated just based on the fact that if your charisma is a little lower, as long as you have a positive modifier, you're probably gonna be fine.
All right.
But I think the one area where paladins do really struggle is if you put an enemy outside of the paladin's movement range, it cannot damage them, right?
Can't contribute.
Paladins, okay, sure, you can get a couple like ranged weapons, but you can't. Paladins have proficiency in, I think, all martial and simple weapons. They have proficiency with basically all the weapons in the game, but they cannot smite on a ranged attack. It has to be a melee weapon. So I think that is the one thing that paladins can struggle at, is if an enemy is far away, they can't do most of their things.
Right. I mean, I think if we just look at what's on our list already, the cleric is at S, the fighter is at A, and the paladin is a combination of those two.
Yeah.
So he naturally falls between those two, right?
Yeah. He's either the best of A tier or the worst of S tier.
Yeah. And yes, totally agree. I think the thing for me is a paladin is not a cleric.
Yeah.
The spells that they do have, limited spell slots, for the sure customizable and can swap in and out just like a cleric and druid, but limited number of slots a day that come back on long rest, right? Not short rest.
Yeah, it's long rest.
Yeah, long rest.
Because they're technically a half caster.
Yeah.
So
It's half caster, so they don't have as extensive of a spell list. And their divine smites, the thing that is putting them on the map, takes away another piece of that spell casting ability, right? It takes away the ability for them to go invisible, for them to cast bless or bane or one of these others, right? Also, yeah, any class that gets access to bless automatically in my book becomes S or A tier.
right.
I think bless is the most powerful spell in the entire game, and anyone can fight me on it.
Sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. Paladin, I would say an A tier.
Yeah, I'm leaning A tier. So let's throw Paladin in A.
Good job, Paladin.
Good job, Paladin. Very good. All right.
Oh man,
it's
Ranger
Ranger
going first
time.
again.
You are going first again. I will preface Ranger by saying, sorry, Ranger fans, if you're out there.
I will say, it was a question that came up in our discussion video.
Yeah.
Of what class do we think we are? Like us personally. And I was like, I know I'm a Ranger. I know I am because, well, let's look at the Ranger, right? What is it built for? The Ranger, I think, is built for tracking and fighting and finding out. They're taking the hobbits to Isengard, right? They are built to go across this country, be this outlying defender. Everything that the Outlander background kind of sums up. I'll come back to that.
I mean, if you sit down, if you like Lord of the Rings, right, and you're rolling in here and you're like, I'm gonna be Aragorn because Aragorn is the best character. No, second
Ranger,
best. Samwise Gamgee's the best character, but Aragorn's like one of the best characters. He's a ranger from the north. That sounds so cool. I want to do that. And then
pretty quickly,
you look at the actual class.
You realize the ranger. There is nothing the ranger can do that can't be done by the fighter with an Outlander background. They both get the same having a fighting style, but the fighter gets more options. The fighter also has a bunch of proficiencies and such, and with the Outlander or Folk Hero or one of these other backgrounds, with the right background, you could replicate what the Ranger can do.
Yeah.
Now, where the Ranger actually comes into play, and I think, like we all know, like Wizards of the Coast recognized this and updated it in Tasha's Cauldron to everything and said, no, okay, here's the new things here's how to Ranger now. We're going to fix this. Those improvements, those customizable options do help make things very interesting. I don't think they're enough.
Yeah, and I think even so, if all you have is like, that Wizards of the Coast very specifically is designed 5e to work, that if the only thing you have is player's handbook, you should still be able to enjoy the game basically to its fullest. Yeah, I'm sorry, PHB Ranger options are bad.
There is the first
good.
It's the Hunter. That's the Aragorn from Lord of the Rings build of rushing in, and you see all the orcs. Yeah, your moves, your abilities can hit multiple of them. Great. Realistically, how often in play does that actually come into effect?
Yeah,
it can happen, and if you're looking for it, you'll find situations to use that, right? And you basically can, and on some of them, it's getting, what is it, volley or multi-attack? You basically get another attack off on someone that's like within 5 feet of you, right? If you have 2 within 5 feet, you can then the same swing hit somebody else. That's a cool mechanic. It doesn't get improved ever, and it's so rare that might happen on the battlefield that you have to go, okay. Yeah. The other popular thing about Rangers is having the Beast Companion, right? having the Beastmaster as the subclass. And all I'm going to say about Beastmaster is, have you seen Find Familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen some of the Artificer classes?
Right.
Others do the Ranger better than the Rangers do.
I will say,
breaks my heart.
The Beastmaster update in Tasha's is much better, and what they do with it is more in line with some of the companion-based abilities that other classes have gotten, like Artificer. It is a little bit more in line with like the Battlesmith, I think Artificer gets.
Yes.
It's more similar to that. So that's good. That improvement is there. But yeah, even with the Tasha's improvements on Ranger, I think it's just super underwhelming compared to the other classes.
You can reflavor another
and
class.
Again, I've played a Ranger in a one-shot, and it was very fun. But boy, like mechanically speaking, the Ranger needs a lot of improvement. It needs...
Because this is a game of Dungeons and Dragons, it's not the Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
There's so much built into the Ranger about finding food and finding, like, being able to track. And I think some of the stuff that they like updated for Tasha's as the customizable improvements, but I have never once played a game where the DM has said, track your food, track your water.
Yeah.
Because that's often not fun.
Right.
And so DMs, if there's a rule to throw out, that'll be the first one to go.
Yeah, and I think there is a theoretical table where people do get really into the nitty. Here's the thing, right? So tables that like getting into the nitty-gritty of, do we have enough food, do we have enough water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Ranger's abilities that nullify that then are like, well, then what's the point of, like, okay, then that gets rid of that fun. And if you're a table that doesn't want to worry about that, then the DM probably already threw that idea out anyway. You know what I mean? Like, I think there are tables that do really like tracking those things. I've seen discussions about finding fun and doing those things online before. So I know those tables exist. Not, I've never played at one of those tables, but I know those tables exist. But then at those tables, there's the fact that the Ranger gets rid of that.
Yeah.
Then defeat, like,
we're back at
it's
square
kind of
one,
a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing with the Ranger, right? Because
if that was a required like mechanic that cannot be thrown out, something as crucial as like armor class, the Ranger would be an S tier.
Yeah.
Because it just solves the problem.
Right.
But I'm not going to put it in S tier.
No, I think Ranger is very much not S tier.
I want so badly to put it in C tier. That if you want to put it in C tier, I'll put it there with you.
No, I think it's a D. I think it's a D tier.
No.
It is.
We have to do it. We have to do it. The tier is here.
By our own logic, our own rules, the Ranger, I think, is just it is by far the hardest to make work well, especially because you can do basically everything the Ranger can do with other classes, other class background combos, etc. So
yes, like Hunter's Mark is another of the Ranger's bread and butter.
Yeah, it's 1d6.
Later on, I shall give you the Hexblade Warlock.
Yeah.
Bye, Ranger. Thank you so much for keeping our borders safe.
Sorry, Ranger.
Thank you for doing the hard work.
Yep.
Please go do that over there.
Yep, stay in the woods. Okay, Rogue. Rogue, I guess it's my turn to talk first. Hey, rogues are great. Love me a good rogue, right? They're extremely good infiltrators. They are very good at like the high, they're obviously really good at stealthing. The ability to hide as a bonus action to then get off their sneak attack, and then the fact that rogues have other ways that they can get their sneak attack off is great. Sneak attack in itself allows rogues to do just an absolute truckload of damage, right, in one hit, especially at higher levels, especially
they've got that
critical hit. They are, and they can get in and get out real quick and real easily, which I think they do. I think they are better at than even the monk, which I was saying that's something that monk is really good at, is mobility. I think rogues edge out the monk in that regard. I think rogues are great. I think rogues are really, really good. For me personally, I don't have that much interest in playing a rogue, just because that's just not the character type I want to play. But that's not what we're ranking here. We're ranking how good they are, and I think a rogue it's a solid A tier. I think it's an A tier class.
I think I agree. The rogue was the first. Arcane Trickster was the first character I ever did play, and as soon as it was first explained to me how to make sure that and utilize this whole sneak attack thing, and like that's the kind of the TM had to be like, hey, that's your bread and butter. You know how to do this, right? And I'm like, oh, it unlocks a fun way of looking in combat, a fun way of looking at the battlefield and saying, where in this scenario can I go to make sure I can get this sneak attack to work, right? There's that other element that kind of is the same appeal that I have with that the combat maneuvers of the fighter, of kind of looking at the battlefield in this fun pseudo metagamey way and saying, okay, now how can I manipulate this to maximize my efficiency, right? And of course, there's something to be said for those stressful moments where everyone around the table, those nail-biting moments of sneaking through, infiltration, being the face, like picking the locks. Yeah. Others can do it, but can they do it as well as the rogue?
Yeah.
I could be convinced to put it S tier, but I think A.
I think A. If somebody in the comments wants to explain why rogue is S tier, I'm very happy to
I don't think they justify the whole filling the hole of magic ?
Yeah.
Enough to warrant,
right,
because 5th edition is so reliant on magic.
Yeah. Getting a class that can do magic damage reliably is important. I know a lot of tables, right? You can pretty much expect to get magic weapons at some point, but let's, just for the sake of assume that you don't get a magic item at all in the game. Rogues are going to start struggling by the end, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep, they'll need some help. Great. Hey, speaking of magic,
sorcerer time. I think you
magic
get to lead us off with the sorcerer.
So, the sorcerer.
Yeah.
Love me some sorcerer. Again, another charisma-based class.
Yep.
Automatically, that puts it as a good face infiltrator, simply because you're going to be building in that regard, right? So far, all the charisma-based classes that we've encountered, they're all sitting there at A tier.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to have the sorcerer join them in A tier.
Interesting.
For me. And here's why.
Yeah.
The fact that their spell list, while not as versatile as the wizards, I'm not going to mention that anymore because we're not on wizards. It is a wide variety of interesting, fun spells. The sorcerer can sometimes fall into the trap of fireball, 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 of just casting the same, I'm going to blow everything up. That makes it kind of feel like a one-trick pony, but there are mechanics built in that make it unique and interesting, right? The ability of those meta magic abilities of taking your spells and the twinning spell, hasting, doing the quicken spell, making sure your spells are more potent, really gives it this interesting flair, especially given the fact that you can burn some of those to get your spell slots back. And that's a really interesting way that no other class can just get things back, right? It has to be on a short rest, at least. I have to look at the picture of the sorcerer a little more to think. There's a versatility of utility spells that the wizard has that the sorcerer does not.
Yeah.
So therefore, I don't think it's the best. I don't put it at S tier because it can't quite do everything. But I think there's enough interesting pieces of the sorcerer that it's easily can outclass many of the others and hold its own against these other A tiers.
I like what you're saying. I do have to say I disagree. I think Sorcerer is actually a B tier. So,
ooh, nice.
Here's why I think Sorcerer is a B tier. There's a couple of major things that really hold the Sorcerer back for me. I think number one is they have, barring the Warlock, we'll get to the Warlock later, but the Warlock has their whole own separate mechanic in terms of how spells work. Barring the Warlock, Sorcerers have the fewest, I believe I'm correct in saying they have the fewest spells that they can pick over the course of the game. They have the fewest spells they can pick over the course of the game and limited spell slots to go along with that. Now, obviously, every magic class has limited spell slots. So, okay, sure. But I think sorcerers at a certain point are really like lacking for choice almost in terms of the spell options that they have, right? They only have, because they can't change their spells on a long rest like Paladin, Cleric, Druid can. Wizard can change its spells on a long rest even, as long as they have it in their spell book. And I know that like the wizard having access to extra stuff on their spell book is reliant on DMs giving spell books and spell scrolls as loot. But even so, you know, they at least get 2 new spells at least every time they level up. Most sorcerer level ups, you get 1 new spell. And that's it.
Right.
Sometimes a new cantrip, but I think the lack of spell options really hurts the sorcerer. Meta magic is cool, and there are some very cool options with meta magic, but I think a lot of meta magic options sound cooler on paper than they end up being in practice, number one. And number two, some of the meta magic options are done, the things that they do are done better by other classes. In particular, I'm thinking of Careful Spell. So Careful Spell is the sorcerer ability where you can choose targets that automatically succeed on their saving throw against your spells or even effect spells. That's really good if you're tossing a fireball. But they automatically succeed. That doesn't negate the damage. So if you're throwing a fireball into the middle of combat and you've got allies there, they are taking that fireball damage. Versus School of Evocation Wizard, they can just cancel the damage. No damage. Like School of Evocation Wizard, certain number of targets, they can just choose. Yeah, they both succeed on the spell and don't take any damage from it, which is a very good ability. Now, if I were playing in a game where I didn't have a School of Evocation Wizard in the party, and I did have a Sorcerer, and the Sorcerer wanted to do Careful Magic as one of their meta magic options, I would, I won't even say probably, I would home rule it that it counted. Because I'm doing that in one of my home games, because that's more satisfying. But if I had a School of Evocation Wizard in the party, I wouldn't want to take that. I wouldn't want to like make one of their core features less, good,
less valuable.
Less valuable. So, I just think sorcerers are good, but I think they're just lacking enough in certain areas that I think it brings them down to a B. They're solid.
You have convinced me.
Okay.
Because of very early on, yes, I think I agree. I'm gonna take it down to a B with you. They are a spellcasting class.
Yeah.
As a spellcasting class, as you pointed out, they have access to the least number of spells to know.
Yep.
And a shorter list than many other spellcasting based classes.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on to warlocks then.
The warlock.
Warlock. So the warlock is maybe one of the most interesting classes in a lot of ways. And I think that a warlock is, for me, I have difficulty figuring out where to place warlock because I think it's strongly dependent on the campaign. Because warlocks, very few spell slots, but they recharge on a short rest. So if you're playing in a campaign where there are many combat encounters per day, where you're taking lots of short rests, that warlock is like basically at full power after every short rest. And that's great. If you're playing in a game where you're not getting many short rests, either because you're only doing 1 or 2 combats per day, or because for whatever other reason, there's just not that many short rests per day, then as a warlock, you start looking at your, 2 spell slots that you start with, eventually up to a grand total of 4, I believe, or 5, somewhere in there, 4 or 5. And you're like, then you look kind of jealously over at some of the other spellcasting classes and how many spell slots they have. And I know warlocks also get the Mystic Arcanum abilities, which is once per day being able to cast a higher level spell, but that's just it. It's it's once per day. They're the only spells warlocks get that don't recharge on a short rest. That all being said, warlocks are the best cantrip casters in the game because not only do they get access to arguably the best damage dealing cantrip in the game, but they also have their invocations they can use to take that cantrip and customize the hell out of it.
Crank it up beyond 11.
So you've got that, and then so you've got, you pick your patron, then you pick your then you get to pick your invocations, and then you get to pick a pact as well. So there's like a ton of options on how you can like alter and change your warlock, like Pact of the Blade. Obviously, if you want to be a swordlock, or another weapon warlock, or Pact of the Tome if you want access to some like more spell options, or Pact of the Chain, I believe, is you get a familiar that's like better than most other familiars. So I warlock gets a lot of cool customization options, but I just have a very hard time figuring out where to place it because I think warlock could fit anywhere between C and A. Right? It can be depending on the campaign, depending on how you build the warlock, depending on all of that, it could be easily upper echelon A tier, or it could be like bottom C tier. I don't think it ever drops into D tier for me personally, but I think it's just, it's so dependent on how you play it and the campaign that you're in. But if you want to speak to Warlock a little bit. One last thing I will say, Hexblade Warlock with Pact of the Blade is an incredibly is very, very good. Very, very powerful.
You don't say.
Hexblade's Curse, the Hexblade being able to use your charisma, then add on top of that the Pact of the Blade, which means you completely open the door on basically any weapon you want to be your Hexblade. It synergizes really well. It's really, really powerful. But Anyway.
I think that the Hexblade Warlock in particular immediately goes in A tier.
Mm-hmm.
It is the combination of spell versatility with being upfront, and it has enough spells in its spell list, whether that's Misty Step, Armor of Agathis, I believe, do they have Mirror Image? I
I'm
might be
not
confusing
sure.
that with Artemis. But there is so many ways to make sure you don't get hit while you're up front. You get medium armor with it. That one alone, I think it's so good, requires a special like note.
Yeah.
I'll be like, the Warlock, but the Hexblade Warlock.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the Warlock.
I will say, yeah, Hexblade Warlock is also easily one of the best gishes in the game, right? If you're looking at that perfect
and by gish,
blend
Ben,
of,
you mean?
Yes, if you're gish being that perfect blend of a martial and magic class. So Hexblade Warlocks are one of the best gish options in the game. I think you've really got it depends on if you count Paladin as a gish. I think some people wouldn't, because Paladins are divine casters as opposed to arcane casters. So leaving Paladin out of the equation, I would argue that Paladins are still a gish, but that's just me personally. But leaving Paladins out of the equation, you know, I think like the top 3 gish options are sort of Hexblade Warlock, Blade Singer Wizard, and probably Valor Bard. I think I like Valor Bard better than Swords Bard, but anyway. Swords Bards are flashier.
That's not what we're talking about.
That's not what we're talking about.
Like,
that's not what we're talking about. Swords Bards are flashier, but Valor Bards I think are more consistent. That's sort of my thing. Anyway,
good way of putting it.
So Hexblade Warlock is incredible. That being said, other Warlock, there are some really good. I think the other nice thing too is Warlocks. I think every single Warlock subclass has an expanded spell list, which a lot of classes get expanded spell lists for their subclasses. Some Sorcerer subclasses don't, which is interesting. Another reason why I think it goes B for me. But I believe every Warlock subclass gets an expanded spell list. And
that's customized too. Now, looking at them, you can point and be like, this one's good, this one's not.
Right.
But they are generally customized to support and enhance whatever this path that you've chosen to go down.
Yes, exactly. And I really like you know, like Celestial Warlock is really, really cool to me, both in flavor, but also it has some it's got some really good healing capabilities, especially because it can do it at a range. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think you're right.
So that in itself is great. There's not many classes that get access to
free healing word, basically.
Free healing word that's more powerful than healing word.
The Warlock is this interesting place of while it doesn't have as many spells per short rest, you can choose invocations of some really nice utility spells. Detect magic for free always, whenever you want.
That's true. Disguise self.
Mask of many faces for disguise self anytime you want.
That's
true. There are no limits.
That is true. And I mean, I you know, Genie Warlock gets the basically the free tiny hut, essentially. Like you have just a box you can go inside of, which is pretty cool. And I think it starts as just you, but it does expand to like you and other creatures that you designate, which is cool. There's the Genie Warlock, I think is really cool. I think Fiend Warlock gets some cool options.
Every single one of them. is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think
You're
think
honing
I'll
in?
go A.
You're going
I'm
A?
in.
You're
I'm
going A?
going A because you're right. With the invocations, you do get a lot of good utility spells basically for free. So then your limited spell slots don't hurt as much because you can do a lot of those limited things.
In context with looking at the greater party, your wizard doesn't have to blow as many of their little spells or spend 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You can get that detect magic off and see if there's something in this room right now.
Yeah. Yeah, let's
the
go
other
A
thing
for
about
Warlock.
the Warlock. Yeah. The other thing about the Warlock that, again, we're going to break our own rules. I don't think we can talk about the Warlock without talking about the multi-classing capabilities.
Sure.
Because it pairs so well supplementing all charisma-based spellcasters.
And frankly,
Bringing
can
their
be pretty
game
good with non-charisma based classes.
And goes pretty well if you are a non-magic class. Suddenly, you have magic. You are a class that's built to handle itself without magic.
Yeah.
And now you happen to have a little bit of magic that you can throw out there. It's a nice supplementary thing.
Yeah.
Plus, invocations, if you go just a little bit second level, you get them.
Yeah. And I do also love the built-in role play potential of the
Yes. It automatically creates the opportunity, if you and the DM are willing to explore it, of complex relationships, right? This patron and you. There's an inherent power dynamic between there. What does it look like? Benevolent, not that's the entirety of the, I think it's like the second paragraph in the player's handbook is just talking about figure this out with your DM. And that little paragraph just opens the door to so much creativity potential that takes the role-playing factor of Dungeons and Dragons and just blows it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is Warlock's new for 5th edition, right?
Yes, I believe
it was new for 5th edition.
I'm not that really familiar with past editions, so
Google can tell us.
Google can tell us.
Google can tell us anything. Please hold. Wow, I'm really bad at Googling. It's just a million ads for. Anyway, maybe we'll look this up later.
Anyway, that all being said, Warlock is A.
I could, based upon how, in the hands of an experienced player and how you build it, I think it can join the S tier. But in general, to come back to my unfair critique of the monk, looking at experience maybe isn't the fairest way of doing this. So let's leave it in the A tier.
Yeah. Wizard, then.
The wizard! Is it me?
The wizard. I believe it is you to start us off on the wizard.
So, as I was talking about the sorcerer before, and I was putting it at A. Nah. The wizard is S. Wizard is S tier. Yeah. Nobody casts a spell like a wizard casts a spell.
Nobody casts a spell like a wizard casts a spell.
It's almost to the point that I want to say wizards can do every single spell. That's a very false statement. Yeah. They can't heal. There's no divine spells. There's no nature magic. There's a lot of the unique warlock spells are really unique. They don't have access to those, but they don't need them. The fact that there are so many different subclasses that study and hone in on each school of magic. Now, some are good and some are not, but the wizard is built to fill. Also, I think, like the bard, can fill any role. It can be this damage dealer from afar. Bladesinger can get close. It's a little risky, but you can get close.
But I mean, to talk about Bladesinger, the nice thing about Bladesinger is when you're in the Blade Song, your AC
you get a boost.
Because if you have maxed out Ent and you max out your dex and you're wearing some good light armor, your AC, I mean, look, if you just have studded leather, which I believe is 13
Yes.
plus dex, right? So let's say you have studded leather, let's say you have a +2 to dex,
14
right?
dex,
That's
yeah.
4
+2.
So that's what a 15
Yep.
armor class. Then you add on top of that, if you have maxed out int, when you enter your blade song, AC 20.
Mm-hmm.
Not many things. I mean, yeah, you're probably getting hit, but there's, I mean, you have an AC that is comparable to classes that have best, that rank on that
for, yes.
Yeah, that rank on that, like built for really
Exactly.
good AC. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, magic. Check. Doing damage. Not quite the melee Krithwack factor, unless you're Bladesinger, but pretty heavy Krithwack.
Mm-hmm.
Healing? Not really.
Not really. That's
But
just about the only thing
is that
they
the
can't
best
do.
use of your spells?
Yeah.
And then the idea of you could be the phase. It's possible, but not enough to warrant saying that yes, it's you, because anything's possible in Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
However, because the utility of your spells, the infiltration factor is unlimited.
Yeah. No,
right?
I mean, wizards have easily the best spell list in the game. I said earlier I said clerics have one of the best spell lists in the game. That's because they don't have the best spell list in the game, because the wizard spell list outclasses it a little bit. Now, I still think the cleric overall as a class outclasses the wizard. That's why, for me personally, I think the cleric is the best class in the game. But damn, the wizard is really, really good.
Yep.
It's got so many different subclasses. It can do so many different things. It has the most versatile spell list in the game. Also add that to the fact that if your DM is giving you spell scrolls and spell books as loot, you can, as long as you have the money, basically expand the spell list you can choose from whenever you want.
As long as you've got the money, there is no limit to how many spells you can learn except the spell list itself.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah, you can only prepare a certain number of spells a day, but I mean, that's incredible.
So customizable.
I think it has the most subclasses in the game, or one of the most subclasses in the game.
I think you're right.
Also, to touch on the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount subclasses, the Dunamancy-based subclasses are very good. Chronergist wizards and Graviturgist wizards get some really, really cool abilities. I've already talked about how much I personally love Bladesinger. Bladesinger is very, very cool. And the thing is, right, all the wizard subclasses are great, but I think any wizard subclass reaching its full potential is predicated on picking the right spells, right? So if you go Bladesinger, start picking some buffing spells, right? Get haste, get Tensor's Transformation, which is a much maligned spell, but could be good in the hands of a Bladesinger. Get Steel Wind Strike. But I mean, so yeah, that you do that with that subclass, but then you also have Fireball, right? You also have Witch. You have Polymorph, like
I said Bless was the most powerful. It's Polymorph.
Polymorph is
Polymorph's the most powerful spell.
Yeah, I think Wizard is an easy S. The Wizard is such a good class.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Hey Ben, what's that last one?
Well, this would be Artificer. Of course, Artificer was officially added a little later in Eberron, Rising of the Last War, and then also in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. If you're not an Eberron fan, I do like Eberron. I did vaguely think about when I was designing our campaign, which is set in the Forgotten Realms, but in the Industrial Age. Part of me was like, well, you could just put it in Eberron because they're kind of already in the industrial age. But then I was like, yeah, but then I have all the, I felt more comfortable doing Forgotten Realms stuff than I felt doing Eberron stuff, because Eberron's lore is, not that the Forgotten Realms doesn't have super specific lore, but Eberron's lore is super, super specific and takes place in the time period that the game would be set in. Whereas with the Forgotten Realms, like, if I get a lore thing wrong, it's like, well, it changed in the last few hundred years. You know? So that all being said, that's the history of the Artificer. What do I think of the Artificer? You know, I have a really hard time figuring out how I feel about the Artificer. The Artificer is very cool in concept, and it has its subclasses, I think, are some of the most flavorful and altering subclasses in the game, right? Each Artificer subclass can dramatically change how the Artificer performs. I feel like I just don't have that much experience with Artificers, though.
Right.
If that makes sense.
So I was, the first time I really encountered an Artificer, I was DMing a game, and the Artificer surprised me simply because I didn't know the mechanics, I think, looking back on it, so much. But I believe it was the Battlesmith subclass. The ability to use your tools and gain proficiency in any tool set is very interesting.
No, I mean,
having a companion that you construct is very interesting. That's the Battlesmith and the Artillerist. I don't know much about them. I'm still unfamiliar. That being said, looking at them, I think you can easily say the Artificer is another support class. It is not the big, huge damage dealer. It's not going to be on the front lines typically. Now, if we look at our other support classes that we've mentioned, that's the Bard and the Monk. So what is it about?
And arguably Cleric.
Cleric? Well, because the Cleric can do everything.
Cleric can do everything. Cleric's a great support. Cleric is a phenomenal support class, probably the best support class in the game, but it's also just so good at everything else. It's like hard to call it just a support class.
Exactly. That's why I didn't even include it.
Cleric gets, I'm sorry to go off on about the Cleric again, but so many people are like, oh, I don't want to play the Cleric. I don't want to be just the healer. It's like, Clerics are not just the healer. Okay?
You don't have to be.
Oh my God. Clerics are so good. They're just, Anyway, Artificer.
The Artificer. So the biggest thing, and you mentioned earlier, let's assume that your table doesn't get magical artifacts.
Now they do.
What is the Artificer? What's it called?
Infusions.
Infusions.
Yeah.
Automatically, here you go, party.
And there's a lot of really good options.
There are great ones. He can also do it for himself. Which is a key difference from the Bard, which can't use his bardic inspiration to inspire himself.
The other cool thing about the Artificer is they can attune more items than any other class in the game. And especially at later, I think at like level 20, an Artificer can attune 6 items, and they get a bonus to saving throws to all saving throws based on how many items they're attuned to. We're assuming we're operating at max attunement slots. So at level 20, not taking any stats or proficiencies into account, Artificers get a +6 to every saving throw.
Wild.
That's crazy. Now, how many tables are getting up to level 20? Not that many. But
there's a lot of really fascinating mechanics and ideas behind it. Like you said, there is this niche of the tinkerer, of the mechanical healer, really, because they can fill that role. They have access to a spell list. Being another intelligence-based class, it can't compare to the wizard. It doesn't compare. It's not trying to.
Right.
So looking at all those points, I'm like, okay, I would think it's either an A or a B.
Yeah.
But I look at who we have listed in the A tier, and I do not think it matches that level.
Yeah.
I don't think it can hold its own against a fighter, against a rogue, against the bard.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Artificer goes to B tier with a little note of there are many ways to crank this up.
If there were a B+ or an A-, that's where it would be for me, because like, I think, and maybe it's just because I'm not as familiar with Artificer as I am with the other classes. Like I have, between having players play these classes, playing them myself the few times I get to play, building them myself just for the hell of it, or watching D&D actual plays. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of most of the classes in the game, but Artificer I very, very rarely see used in game.
Yeah.
I've never played one. I have never had a player play one long term. Now, Nyx will be multi-classing into Artificer. I think we talked about that in the discussion video.
I'm excited to watch that, not just like as another player, but to learn what it can do.
Yeah. And I think I love the niche the Artificer fills, because you're right, there's no class that does tinkering at this, until the Artificer was introduced. Now, like any character could theoretically be a tinkerer, but nobody can tinker the way an Artificer can tinker, right? An Artificer can tinker with something for an hour and suddenly, boom, it's a +1, right?
Yep.
Like the infusion options are insane. And then again, depending on the subclass, you get some really, really cool stuff. You want a metal dog that can attack things, Battlesmith. You want just a big old gun, Artillerist. You want to make some spooky potions, Alchemist. You want to be Iron Man, Armorer. Also, when you play an Artificer, you can play Iron Man, which is very cool.
It's real fun.
Very, very cool. But the other interesting thing about the Armorer, and I think a lot of people overlook this, is Armorer doesn't have to be heavy armor. So you could do like a light armorer, for instance, Artificer, theoretically. Yeah. But anyway,
I would be really interested to like revisit this list, revisit the Artificer, and bump it up to A once I've seen it. Once I've seen it happen, right?
Yeah.
But I haven't seen it.
Yeah. I think Artificer. Oh God. Okay, we didn't lose anything. I hit a weird button. Okay, I think Artificer goes in B. Yeah.
And that
is our tier list. So just to quickly run through the tier list, in S tier, we have Cleric, Druid, and Wizard. In A tier, we have Barbarian, Bard, Fighter, Paladin, Rogue, and Warlock. In B tier, we have Sorcerer and Artificer. In C, we have Monk. And in D, we have Ranger. And I think overall what this says is that in D&D, basically all the classes are good.
Everyone's good.
Everyone's
B is
good.
Decent. B is decent at what it does.
Yeah. And even C, we were talking about the drawbacks of the Monk, but the Monk gets some very powerful abilities.
Yep.
So with the exception of Ranger, sorry, Ranger.
I'm determined to find a good way to play Ranger. I'm going to do it one day. I don't know how, but I'm going to do it.
I look forward to the day that you figure that out. But for me personally, I can find something to enjoy about every single one of these classes. So yeah, that's our tier
totally.
ranking. Let us know what your tier list is down in the comments below. Let us know why our tier ranking is wrong.
Yes, please.
Please explain to me why monk should be higher, because I really want to put
We're
monk
looking for
higher.
it.
I desperately want to put monk higher. Even explain to me why ranger is an S tier. Do it. I challenge you to come up with a reason why I should put ranger in S tier. But with that, we will go ahead and call it for the evening. Thank you for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this, and we will see you in a future video. Bye.